I loved Osmosis Jones as a kid. It taught me the importance of health and how to take better care of myself. The movie also inspired me to become a doctor. After graduation, I got into one of the best medical schools in the state. I knew I was going to face all kinds of sicknesses, but then I encountered something in my first year. Even Harvard Medical School couldn't have prepared me for what transpired. I was 2 months into my first year when Dr. Nash got a patient with a peculiar case. Dr. Nash was the best doctor in our hospital. I was shadowing him the day said patient was brought in. I can't disclose his name for legal reasons, so I'll call him Nicholas. When we met Nicholas, he didn't seem too bad. He was suffering from a common cold from what we could tell. Yet for some reason, Nicholas demanded to be admitted. Nicholas claimed that he was going to die. When asked to elaborate, he rambled about being infected by some ancient evil. He was so hysterical that we had to drug him. I was injecting the drug when I noticed how sweaty Nicholas was. I then looked at his vitals and saw that his temperature was rising. Before we could determine what to do next, Nicholas started having breathing problems. We lost him in less than a couple of minutes. Dr. Nash and I were floored by what had just happened. How could someone just pass out of the blue like that? I didn't know why at the time, but what happened to Nicholas struck me as strangely familiar. I knew I'd seen this before, but I couldn't recall where. When my shift ended, I checked my email. There was one sent by an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "A warning to all hospitals." I became a little worried when I saw that. I expected it to be some urgent message from the government or something, but when I opened the email, there was just a single video with a blank thumbnail. It dawned on me that whoever sent this couldn't have been from the government. Out of curiosity, I decided to watch the video. The video began with an older man sitting in front of the camera. He looked to be in his 60s, and was dressed like an archaeologist. The man had a devastated look on his face. He introduced himself as Dr. Lyle Ember, an archaeologist from my hometown. He said that by the time he'd recorded this, it had been 6 weeks since his excavation in the Enfermedad Forest. Enfermedad Forest was located about 100 miles south of my hometown. I live in Louisiana and was very close to the Mexican border. Anyway, there was an ancient temple that stood in those woods. When Dr. Ember learned of it, he gathered a team and went to the temple. Dr. Ember was shocked to see that the temple was filled with gold. Nicholas, who was a member of his team, immediately rushed to the treasure. Dr. Ember scolded Nicholas as he collected some coins. It wasn't until after the threats of being fired that Nicholas discarded the gold. After some translations, Dr. Ember discovered that the temple was dedicated to an unknown entity called Thraxalcon. Thraxalcon was an Aztec spirit who cursed its victims with a disease that the locals called the Hidden Fire. It got its name from its ability to increase the body's temperature and kill its victims before it could be diagnosed. Dr. Ember learned the legends surrounding this temple through some locals. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived in Mexico, one Aztec priest took a drastic step to protect his people. He knew that the Spanish were searching for gold, so he made a trap for the invaders. The Aztecs gathered many riches and stored them in the temple. The priest then asked Thraxalcon to curse anyone who removed the treasure from his temple. As the priest predicted, the conquistadors took the bait. After retrieving the treasure, the conquistadors suddenly fell ill. It started with a cold, but one by one, the conquistadors began dying off. They described the illness as a burning inferno within their bodies. It took at least 2 days for the disease to kill a victim. At some point, the conquistadors realized that the outbreak occurred after stealing the temple's treasures. After returning the riches, the conquistadors miraculously recovered. For 500 years, that temple stood in isolation, forgotten by most of the outside world. And with it being the only one dedicated to Thraxalcon, the deity and his disease were forgotten as well. Somehow, the creator of Osmosis Jones learned of Thraxalcon. This, in turn, inspired the villain for his movie, Thrax. At the end of the video, Dr. Ember implored everyone to stay away from Thraxalcon's temple. I sat there trying to process what I just watched. I then felt my heart sink when I realized something horrifying. What happened to Nicholas that day was precisely what happened to Frank in Osmosis Jones. That's where I recognized his illness from. For years, I thought the Red Death was a fictional disease. Yet there I was, seeing the disease with my own eyes. I guess Nicholas decided to return for the treasure, despite knowing the consequences. Wherever his stash is, I hope it's been returned to its rightful place. Otherwise, the world would be in great danger.